at some point the SDGs will be achieved. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be all of them achieved by, by the end of the decade. But bit by bit, humanity has made some progress.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Hello, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest. And he will introduce himself. Chris, please go ahead.
My name is Chris Herlinger. I live in New York City this month, September 2021. It will be 30 years since I arrived in New York City. I started out my work as a journalist. I've been a working journalist all my life. And I came to New York City after about 10 years in newspapers, working on newspapers in the state of Minnesota, where I went to college. I attended Macalester College, a small liberal arts college in St. Paul. And it was, I can say, very much happy to say it was at Macalester that I really found the foundation that I've used all my life to work on international issues, report on international issues. I majored in history and had a minor in English and East Asian studies. During my junior year, I was a student in Hong Kong, which was a wonderful event, which expanded my view of the world. And when I was in Minnesota working as a newspaper journalist, even then I was doing trips about once a year outside the U.S. and the wars in Central America were going on at the time. And the first trip I took was to Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Mexico. And then after that, I did other trips to Chile, South Africa, the Philippines, and those trips were important. I was part of a group of people under the aegis of the Center for Global Education, which was a educational group, international group at Augsburg College in Minneapolis. But it was there. Those trips were important because I began to write about issues of religion, social issues internationally, hunger, and that led me ultimately to get a fellowship to study at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, where I was from 91 to 93. I got a master's in theology.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, settled in New York City, worked for a while as a freelancer for the United Methodist Church. Then after that, I worked for Church World Service as a writer, later senior writer. I was at CWS for 18 years. And at the same time, and let me say, that was a very important part of my career. I did a lot of travel internationally. The places I went to, there were so many, my goodness. Afghanistan, Indonesia, Sudan, Honduras after that really after what was it, Hurricane Mitch. I was in the Balkans during and after those wars there, and I know I'll be missing. Oh, certainly Haiti. I mean, that was another very important place after the earthquake. So by the time I left CWS, I was I think pretty well versed in the world of international disaster response, and also development issues were front and center. Um, During that time, I was also freelancing and began a relationship with National Catholic Reporter, which is a independent newspaper in Kansas City, which reports on the Catholic Church, religious issues in general, um, and but humanitarian issues. And I would, from my trips for CWS, I would freelance articles about my travel, and always made sure to talk to sisters and priests when I was there. I do remember one. I don't know if you can find it online. I think it's buried somewhere on some internet
Mm-hmm.
burial site. But
Yeah.
I do remember a very important trip for me was a trip I took for CWS to Liberia
Mm.
after the war there, and that was very, very vivid. Um, I want to go back to the Afghanistan experience in a moment, because I've been thinking about that lately, given the 9/11 anniversary and what's happened in Kabul.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, after I left CWS and got a position working for Global Sisters Report, which is a project of National Catholic Reporter. We are a project that's funded through the Hilton Foundation. And what we do is highlight the work of Catholic sisters throughout the world, both in the US and internationally. My title is international correspondent, and in that role, I do some travel every year, although that's been curtailed, obviously, in the last year and 3/4. But we're hoping that will resume probably next year. But I also cover the UN, what sisters are doing in terms of advocacy work at the United Nations.
That's incredible when I me and the listeners are listening carefully to you and everything that you experienced. Um, if I ask you, to tell us if what article you have written for the sisters, in the last couple of years, what is then the article that is closest to your heart that really, you know, yeah, it meant a lot for you as Chris Herlinger, who has been
Sure,
working in this field for quite some time.
sure. Oh, there's so many. The migration series we did a few years ago. I think that was important. Um, 2 or 3 years ago, but I was in Rome, and then in very briefly in Athens, but interviewing people from the Middle East who had arrived in Italy and in Greece. Those stories, their stories are very, very uh, moving. I think the certainly in the last COVID, we've had a lot of coverage on that, and that's been tough. That's been tough in some ways. I've known 3 people who died of COVID. Not thankfully family or close friends, but people. One family friend from Denver, where I grew up, and then but 2 people I knew from my time travels. There was a sister who was actually doing work, an Italian sister in Rome, doing work with migrants, and I interviewed her for a story. She died, and then a Catholic a Catholic bishop I knew in when I was in Bangladesh, who was a wonderful man, and who was very hospitable to me, and he was just a very decent guy. And obviously the Catholics in Bangladesh are a minority, very small minority, and he was a good shepherd, if I can use that phrase. So I did a long obituary on him.
Hmm.
Um, we did a series on homelessness, which I was the one who thought, given my experiences here in New York City, just seeing homeless people who are homeless on the streets. I thought it would be a worthwhile topic, and so we ended up doing a very this was 2 years ago. We did a very long series on that encompassed both work sisters are doing here in the U.S. and also internationally.
Mm.
So that was significant.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say the one piece that's maybe closest to me right now
Mm-hmm.
is a piece I did just last week on personal reflections on 9/11, and that I was here in New York. I was working for Church World Service at the time on 9/11. So I've wrote about my experiences in New York City that day and in the following days and weeks, but it was tied up um, as it had to be with my experience in Afghanistan, which I had been in Afghanistan just in July before 9/11, just 2 months before, for Church World Service and for Action by Churches Together, the ACT Alliance, reporting with a colleague from Denmark, Niels Carstensen. Uh, we were doing some reporting on a drought, which was not at the time getting a lot of attention in the West. And so it was a wonderful trip. It was maybe the best single trip I've taken in my life, just because
Mm.
we had the opportunity to basically travel across the country, and we were left alone. The Taliban, I'm no fan of the Taliban, but I will say they were very respectful to us in terms of giving us travel permits and all that. Um, but obviously, we saw the results of Taliban rule, which was quite tragic, obviously. Um, but Afghanistan somehow got into my head. I can think of three countries that have sort of had that effect on me. Afghanistan would be one. Haiti would be another. I think Haiti's the country I've been to the most on my travels. I think 5 or 6 times. And then South Sudan. Um, these countries have faced enormous difficulties and continue to face enormous difficulties and challenges.
Mm.
And yet I've always been struck by how resilient people are in these circumstances. But they're the three countries I'm always kind of, if I can use the phrase, rooting for.
Mm.
Um, but they always seem to face considerable challenges.
Mm. When you, what do you hope to achieve with the articles that you write?
Well, when you're young, you you think you're going to change the world somehow, and I think I'm 61. Those of us from my time, growing up in the 70s, I think we looked at Woodward and Bernstein, the reporters on the Washington Post who uncovered the Watergate scandal. I think those guys were kind of our models, and I think journalists thought, we could change the world with our journalism. I'm a little bit more I'm more modest about what we can do. I think, especially in this era where that world I knew as a young journalist, as a young high school student, um, starting to think about journalism. I mean, that world, that print world, as we know, is really no longer with us. So it's a different media landscape. So there's so many voices and so many distractions in our media laden world. Um, I don't think I'm thinking necessarily that reporting is going to change the world, but in a big way. But I do think it's important to cast light on topics that might not otherwise get covered. And so in my reporting throughout the last 40 years, humanitarian issues like hunger, like poverty, um, what people like the Catholic sisters are doing. I think those are topics that that should be covered. I think of it as it's a small effort on my part, um, but it's something I feel compelled to do, something I feel called to do, if I can use that
Mm-hmm.
religious language.
Yeah, and Chris, I do think that many agree with me that you often accomplish, a lot in terms of affecting people and telling the story and sharing that with the world. I mean, you have received many times different prizes for awards, for the things that you have written. So congratulations. I would like to talk with you a little bit about hunger because I think you wrote a trilogy of 3 books about different topics, and one of the books was about hunger. I really think it's a great book. Yeah, tell the listeners who are not familiar with the 3 books that you wrote, why you wrote it, and why they should start reading it, because I think they should.
Sure. Well, it's a trilogy published by Church Publishing of Seabury imprint, which is the publishing house of the Episcopal Church here in the U.S. The first book was on Darfur. The second book was on Haiti, and then the third and final, it is a trilogy, kind of like the Star Wars trilogy, I guess. But the Hunger book was the last of the 3. Hunger was and remains an issue that touches, I think, all of these places that I've been to, and so it was that book. That's the last book, so it's closest in my memory, certainly. And I want to give a shout out. This was not something I did on my own. I wrote the text, but photographer and journalist Paul Jeffrey contributed the photographs, which are excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So,
great photographer.
Yeah, no, wonderful guy, wonderful photographer. But it felt somehow fitting, if I can use that word, to finish the trilogy with a focus on hunger, just because hunger is a topic that just never goes away, and it's been a reality in every single place that I've been to. But I just saw a piece on Afghanistan and how, I think it was the UN saying that given the chaos of the last month or so, the country faces a very, very serious problem with the possibility of a famine, and possibly affecting children. And of course, the winter months are coming up, and winters can be very, very tough and serious there. So the UN is sounding the alarm on that, and that's of course one kind of hunger, one kind of dilemma when you've got a humanitarian crisis like the one Afghanistan is facing now. But there are situations where there's chronic hunger, and where there's not an immediate crisis, but there's an underlying problem of people not getting enough to eat, not attaining food security.
The listeners also know, eradicating hunger is very close to me. It's one of the reasons that I started the 100-mile walk, and I hope to do this year the 10th. And that is related with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we identified as a world, and we should, try to aim for them. Chris, last year during my 9th 100-mile walk, I was not able to walk with other people. So that's why actually I started this podcast, to still talk with people about hunger and poverty and injustice. The question that I always ask to my fellow walkers, in this case virtually, if you would be asked to walk 100-mile, so 15 to 20 miles a day for a cause, why would you walk? For what cause? What reason?
Oh my goodness, Maurice! There's so many. There's so many causes. I mean, there's so many challenges in the world. No, certainly hunger would be one of them. I think I will say, given the challenges in places, particularly like Afghanistan or South Sudan, which are facing or have faced um, civil war, civil conflict, um, I and where there have been large groups of people migrating within the country and outside the country. Um, Certainly, anything to do with that humanitarian dynamic, war related. Um, I would I would walk for that. Certainly, something I've mentioned in the articles I've done recently, two articles recently about Afghanistan. The issue of women and children who
Mm-hmm.
are the challenges they face in an environment like Afghanistan right now. Um, they're oftentimes the frontline victims of war.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think anything to do with that theme,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly hunger would, yeah, obviously I would also I would walk for that cause as well,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
fighting hunger.
Yeah, understood. Um, no, and I when you started talking, it's pretty amazing, and thanks for sharing. How you got yourself into this work, and what yeah, how that developed. I still would like to ask you, when your alarm clock goes off or you wake up in the morning, what makes it that you will get out of bed and start working? What drives you in life?
Well, I think again, just a feeling, a good feeling, a feeling that I'm contributing in a very small way, and to shedding light on problems that may not get the attention that they deserve. In our media saturated environment, there's a lot of trivial stuff, and I mean we all consume trivial stuff. I mean, I do, you do, we all do. But I think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that we have a responsibility to uh, watch out for each other, to watch out for our brothers and sisters, and that means for journalists like myself, that means doing our work and casting light on um, problems and dilemmas that that need attention. And luckily, I'm amazingly fortunate and blessed. I mean, I've got the opportunity to write about uh, women, a group of women who, though they're all different and they're all individuals, and their congregations are different. They have different missions, but on the whole, they're a remarkable group of women who are, I think, helping the world. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to write about them and to write about their work. But these larger themes, the chance to write about the larger themes that I think need to be um, focused on. You mentioned the SDGs; those are a very important part of what I've covered in the last 5 years um, for GSR and covering the UN. It's the SDGs they're they're landmarks, and no one thinks that they're going to be achieved. Um, this is a long term process. It's a long term process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we have to keep sight. We have to keep our eyes, eyes on the prize,
Mm-hmm.
and focused on what the ultimate goal will be. Uh, I'm hopeful that at some point the SDGs will be achieved. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be all of them achieved um, by the end of the decade. But bit by bit, humanity has made some progress. Um, but unfortunately, we've got some real challenges, and as we know from the last year and 3 quarters,
Mm-hmm.
um, we've been as a species we've been tripped up. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also right now I'm just this week I'm doing a doing some reporting on the just transition to a more sustainable world,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it's all related, of course, to climate change. And again, people within the church, sisters in particular, not only sisters though. I think the Catholic Church has embraced the issue of climate change in a very impressive way.
Hmm.
with Pope Francis at the top, making this a priority. Um, we have a lot to overcome.
Hmm.
Um, I hope we can do it. I think we can do it. But my goodness, there are certainly a lot of hurdles facing us, and we have to figure out a way to overcome those hurdles.
Hmm. Hey, Chris, when I listen carefully to you, religion, church,
Mm-hmm.
faith-based organization, spirituality, that plays an important role in your life. It's often you have worked for them, for those institutions.
Uh-huh.
What I would like to ask you, because I've talked a lot with my fellow walkers as well around this, if you look at the younger generation, how
Mm-hmm.
they look at religion and spirituality, how they perceive that.
Sure. Sure.
What do you see in your environment? Is that different, or is that similar to how you look at it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I live and work in the faith-based world. I'm I'll just say, I mean, I'm a sort of a classic liberal Episcopalian, um, and but being a liberal Episcopalian uh, doesn't mean that I don't see the humanity and people I may disagree with theologically. Um, I think church broadly termed uh, is a place where people can come together um, with their brokenness, and it's one of the few places I think where people can do that. Um, I know as a journalist, I don't really cover the U.S. religious world, the landscape, but I sometimes I have to, so I know enough about it to know that um, the landscape is changing, and
Mm,
we know that organized, so-called organized religion is not faring as well as it used to. People are
mhm,
not going to church in the Christian tradition, not going to church as often as they did. They're finding alternative ways to express their faith, spirituality, and I think young people are very much part of that. Um, but I don't think that that means that they are um, just shutting themselves off from
mhm.
religion. I've not covered this topic. A colleague of mine at GSR has, but the issue of nuns and nuns.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've heard about this, but
Yeah. Can you explain that for the listeners?
yeah, it's the process where sisters are finding they've actually engaged in dialogue with young people who are not or who are not churchgoers themselves,
Mhm,
but somehow want to keep the work, the social dimension, that aspect of sisters' work alive somehow. Um, and so, sisters are very. I mean, they are religious. They are women religious. They take their faith seriously and they work within a structure. Um,
mm,
but I have to say, every sister that I've known and interviewed and worked with is very open to people of different faiths, people who are not Catholic. Um,
mhm,
and so I'm not surprised that sisters, particularly in the U.S., many of them are engaged in a dialogue with 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 young people who
mhm,
don't necessarily affiliate with the church, with the
mhm,
Catholic Church, and yet they find there's a spiritual connection there. And one of the this is an issue we talk about. We cover a lot of GSR. I mean, particularly in the U.S., the aging of Catholic sisters. The congregations are getting older, um, and there's a question of how their work will continue. I mean, many of the sisters are in their 70s and 80s. Um, what will happen? What will happen in 20 years?
mm,
I think many of the congregations will probably not exist. There will be some, I think, Not all of them will still be around, but they've found ways to keep their work alive,
Mm.
and be it through social work, homelessness ministries that will continue past
Mm-hmm.
their time leaving the scene. I'm just finishing a series on the issue of land easements, conservation easements in the Hudson Valley.
Mm.
That several congregations, sisters congregations, are um, they have property. They're property rich,
Mm-hmm.
um, but what they've done is handed over, not handed over, but well, handed over in effect, um, to conservation groups, so that when um, their land will be protected
Mm-hmm.
in perpetuity. So it is not developed, um, and it's property rich land, and the real estate, of course, in New York City, but also in the north of the city in the Hudson Valley. Property is at a premium, but the sisters want to ensure that it's protected, um, for the good of all, and for the good of creation.
No, I really would like to encourage the listeners to check out the GSR, the Global Sister. What's the R stands for?
Global Sisters Report.
Okay, yeah, Global Sisters Report, because there are a lot of interesting articles, not only written by Chris, but many are. Chris, when I asked that question about the younger generation and religion and spirituality, you said, I'm not really busy with the younger generation in the US, but through your travels, you meet, young people overseas. So what do you see there with in countries like Haiti, Afghanistan, Indonesia? What do you see? What did you see?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think. Well, I think there are, of course, many young people who are, um, young people who just, uh, they're like young people anywhere, everywhere. They're not necessarily focused on religious faith per se. Um, but I do sense that as people get older, um, I think the faith traditions will continue. Um, and I do think there is a kind of global consciousness among young people on some of these critical issues. I think
Mm,
particularly climate. Um, uh, yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, right now we look at the situation in the world, and again, the last year and 3 quarters of it, it's been hard for the whole world. Um, I'm not complaining. I have a job. I've been able to continue my work. I'm frustrated I don't get to travel, right
mhm,
now, but I hope that continues. But I do think younger people see the urgency on this climate issue,
mm, mm,
and I think we'll make it work. That will make the solutions work. I just did an interview yesterday with someone on the just transition piece I was telling you about, and he was a guy in his uh, late 60s, and he said he's impressed by, like, his son-in-law, who takes. I mean, this is a small thing, but I mean, really takes the issue of recycling, consumption, um, alternative transportation, really takes that seriously. And I see that in my I see that around me. It's funny. I was just thinking. This just popped in my head. Last night I had to go into. I live in Queens, and I had to go into Manhattan to meet someone. And along the way, there was I think it was my state assemblyman, a young guy, a young Muslim guy who just got elected from my neighborhood in Astoria, and he's very much based in the activist world. And he was handing out flyers to get people to send a letter, even that night, to the governor and some other panel to oppose some fossil fuel burning plant that's being proposed for um, here in Queens. And I didn't have time to go back home and write a formal letter, but I did write a small little note and send it out.
Mm.
And I thought that was impressive. He was he was putting out flyers, handing them to people. There was only 5 hours until midnight, which was the deadline. But there was an activism there, and I was able to write something very, very, very quickly. And I think that kind of activism that is makes it easy for people to get involved. I think that's a nice example of what I think younger people are focused on. They can do things like that really, really quickly.
Yeah. No, and that is definitely hopeful. And a lot of people I've spoken with, when I ask the question about where do you see hope, they talk about the younger generation, and especially linked it with their awareness and their action around, climate change and taking care of the planet. Chris, you have worked for the organization that I work for. This year, it's we celebrate 75 years of existence, and that's also always a time that you need to reflect. One important thing for us is how did we do around racial justice issues? So my question to you is, if you look at the NGO sector as a whole, faith-based organizations and secular organizations, and you have to give them a grade on a report card, how did this sector do around racial justice? And I'm totally aware that there are different types of NGOs, and one did better than others. But just give some feedback on what you have seen by the NGO sector around racial justice issues within the US and overseas.
Interesting question, Maurice. Well, I can only speak in terms of the NGOs I've known, and I certainly when I write stories, I use the material of essentially secular NGOs. I'm thinking of Human Rights Watch in particular. I think they do good work. Catholic Relief Services, since I write about the Catholic world, I use their material as well. I don't know the ins and outs of how they function. I will say, based on my own experience at CWS and earlier with the Methodist Church, certainly there are. I think there, in the liberal Protestant, if I can use that term, world, I think there's certainly been an awareness and there's been a foundation of good work on through the years. I mean, this goes back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. There was some really, really outstanding work, and certainly I think there have been many people of color within the organizations working as employees and as leaders. Could more be done? I suppose so. But from what I've witnessed on the faith-based side, at least again liberal Protestant side, I would say that the groups have done pretty well. But could there be more done? Sure. I don't know what grade I would give. Maybe not any. Maybe no one deserves an A, but I'd give them a B plus certainly.
A total different question, Chris. I mean, because this is close to my heart. I love music. I also know that you love music, and especially classical music. We have been to the same concerts actually in the past, right? If I ask you to mention a song or a piece of music that embodies for a big part what you are about, what piece of music would that be?
Oh, we discussed this before we began, Maurice.
Mm.
It's so hard. And I'm a classical music guy.
You can cheat. You can mention 3 pieces, you know?
No. But I always stress to people, it doesn't mean that I don't like pop music, popular music. I do. I mean, just last night, the reason I was going to Manhattan is to see a movie, the Jennifer Hudson movie on Aretha Franklin. And I was struck. I mean, I will say, I mean, one piece in that, one song in that is Amazing Grace,
Mm-hmm.
which is a piece I've always loved. And one reason I love it is that there's so many different ways to do it, you know, and there's so many different interpretations of it. In terms of the
What is your favorite interpretation of Amazing Grace? The one that pops up into your mind now?
Well, it just because I just saw the movie.
Okay, yeah.
But no, I mean, I think Aretha Franklin's is marvelous interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an interesting story behind that, because the lyrics are by a one-time slave owner, I think, who had saw the light and had become an abolitionist, I think. So there's a real depth of meaning to those words, about being loved. In terms of the classical world, I mean, my God, there's so many pieces. I mean, I do like, as I think you alluded to, the concert we heard, I think, was Mahler's Third with the New York Philharmonic. Certainly the symphonies of Mahler, those would be at the top of the list. I like the Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky, the ballet that caused such a scandal. I love the rhythmic boldness of it. I will say it's funny, in the last year, during lockdown, whatever we call it, there was we missed some of there was a lot of intended celebrations of Beethoven's what was it, the 250th anniversary of his birth, which got canned. I mean, the live stuff got canceled. But I've been listening to a lot of Beethoven symphonies. I've been listening to the Beethoven symphonies since I was a teenager. But I think something about those in the last year I've come back to those, and I find them to be, just really bold, innovative works. I like works that are, I think, bold and innovative. And think, the Rite of Spring by Stravinsky, that's a bold, innovative work. But the symphonies of Beethoven, if you hear them in the right performances, I think they're very bold and innovative.
How do you ensure that you remain bold and innovative, Chris, in your work and what you do?
I will say it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for all of us, I think, in the last 3 year and 3 quarters. It's I think you just have to just always. I think you have to be intentional. I think you have to be intentional. Not that I feel I'm necessarily bold and innovative, but at the very least alert. And I think what's kept me going, particularly in this time, this last almost 2 years, is feelings, even with all the challenges, and not seeing friends, not seeing colleagues. I mean, like yourself, in person, just still keeping in touch with people, feeling connected. I think that's been really, really key. I think when you don't feel connected in life to others, or to a cause, or to your work, something bigger than yourself, I think that's when problems start to arise.
Thanks for that, Chris. I mean, what I actually hope this podcast, is contributing to is connecting people, because I really believe that if you're able to connect, that might be a start of a conversation, of dialogue, and dialogue is the beginning of a better understanding and making this life a little bit better, and ensuring that we really take care of this planet together.
Sure, absolutely.
Talking with you is always a blessing, and I continue to learn from you, and thanks for everything you do in terms of your writing,
Sure,
and being who you are. The last question that I have for you is do you have any last message, an invitation, or a question for the listeners?
Well, just again, I'm saying this a lot about what things have been like in the last year and 3/4, but something that I think has impressed me in the wake of the George Floyd tragedy is I think something that I've learned from my Black brothers and sisters is that nothing is finished. This struggle continues, and it's you just have to keep going, and it's not always easy, and sometimes it's tiring, and it's been tiring the last year and 3/4, but we really have no other choice but to just keep going, and keep it's a cliche, but I think it's true. You have to just keep hope alive, and I think we keep it alive by just each of us in our own way making our own small contribution.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And yeah,
Sure,
I really
pleasure.
invite the listeners to check out your articles if they haven't as yet, and the books that you've written. Is really important work, still relevant, in a way unfortunate. So check that out, and you will find it in the notes of our podcast. So thanks, Chris.
No, pleasure, Maurice. Good to see you again.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.